In the next few slides, I'm going to be talking about climate change. So what is climate change? How is climate change related to weather? And the factors causing climate change. So what is climate change? Climate change refers to significant changes in global temperature, precipitation, wind patterns, and other measures of climate that occur over several decades or longer. Another definition would be climate change is a long-term change in the weather patterns that have come to define Earth's local, regional, and global climates. So there are a lot of different definitions of climate change, and some are more advanced than others, but they basically all mean the same thing, which is a change in global or regional climate patterns. So because of climate change, there is extreme weather, dirty air, health risks, rising seas, warmer and more acidic oceans, and a declining ecosystem. So this picture on my slide is just like a little representation of the before and after effects of climate change. How is climate change related to weather? Well, climate change and weather are very intertwined, and there are many observations and studies that have showed severe changes in weather due to climate change and the increase of frequency and intensity of heat waves, droughts, heavy downpours, floods, and so much more. All of these factors kind of coincide with one another, meaning if one of these types of weather occurs, another one is going to happen because of that first type of weather. For instance, if your area is experiencing a heat wave, there is most likely going to be a drought. Same with heavy amounts of rain and flooding. So there are these four factors: heat waves, droughts, heavy downpours, and floods. Heat waves are abnormally hot weather lasting for days or weeks. A drought is the cause of heat waves. Heavy downpours are lots of rain, basically, and floods are the cause of heavy downpours. So for heat waves, an important concept to remember is that warmer air can contain more water vapor than cooler air. And then moving down to flooding. Flooding may intensify in the U.S. regions, even in areas where precipitation is projected to decline. It is also caused by major weather factors such as heavy and prolonged precipitation, snow melts, thunderstorms, storm surges, and hurricanes. So in this animated graph, it shows the scientific consensus of Earth's climate change warming. On the y-axis, it represents the temperature increasing and decreasing in Celsius. The x-axis represents the year in which the temperature changed. Each color on the graph represents a different research group measuring the temperatures decreasing and increasing. So this graph is basically showing how before 1940 the temperature was cooler than the years up to 2010 the temperature is rising. The research shows this is because climate change, which is due to a plethora of many different factors. So here in this next slide, there are just some photos of different components of weather and how it affects climate change. So you have droughts, snowstorms, flooding, extreme heat, and so on. So, factors causing climate change. There are two different categories of factors. There are natural factors and human factors. So under the natural factors, there's sun's intensity, volcanic eruptions, naturally occurring greenhouse gas concentrations, and then for human factors, there's greenhouse gas emissions and deforestation. So these are not all the kinds of factors there are. I just chose some of the most important or the ones that I thought were the most important. So the natural factors are occurring much faster than ever before, and they really can't be explained by the natural causes alone. So then that's where the human factors kind of come into play. So human factors mainly contain greenhouse gas emissions and deforestation, which are like the two major ones. So for greenhouse gas, it plays a very important role in keeping our planet warm enough to inhabit, but the amount of gases that are in our atmosphere have skyrocketed in recent decades because of the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas for electricity, heat, and transportation. And this is all because of humans. So now looking at deforestation. Deforestation is a huge one. It's actually one of the biggest factors of climate change. Oh, that's causing climate change. And that's because of logging, clear cutting, and fires, and other many forms of forest declining. So here's just a view of many different components of the climate system and how they are affecting climate change. So this photo is just a little bit more complex than what I explained in the previous slide, but I felt it was good to look at it in a picture form as well.
In the next few slides, we'll be discussing the theories of causation and how climate change has already made an effect on Earth today. The first factor to discuss is how climate change has affected our planet. It is known that climate change has already had many drastic effects on our planet's environment as a whole. In Antarctica and Greenland, the glaciers are starting to melt at a very fast and alarming rate. Around the world, the ice on rivers and lakes is breaking up earlier. Plant and animal ranges have shifted, which means they were forced to relocate in order to survive. And the trees in springtime are starting to flower earlier than they should. Next, it is important to discuss how climate change will continue to affect the planet in the future. If we as humans do not start to make any changes, we will be faced with many negative and upsetting results. These results include temperatures that will continue to rise, animals that will be forced to start moving to new habitats because of the rise in temperature, the frost-free and growing season will lengthen, storms such as hurricanes will continue to grow stronger and lead to more damage, and precipitation, such as rain, snowfall, and hail, will continue to increase. We must also discuss how climate change has affected humans over the last few years. With climate change becoming an everyday part of our lives as humans, we have been affected in an overwhelming amount of ways. First off, since climate change is much more prevalent in our lives, more and more people are moving towards the coastlines, which usually have cooler temperatures, but the coastline is also where the storms appear to hit the hardest. Also, climate change is going to start leading to more frequent and intense natural disasters, which will affect us as humans because these storms can lead to death, injury, and health risks that form from picking up after these disasters. Finally, climate change can lead to many medical and physical issues, such as heat related issues brought on by the increase in temperatures, strong allergies that can form, and an increased exposure to waterborne and vector borne illnesses.
Climate change has affected biodiversity by increasing extreme events, temperature spikes, chloral bleaching, and raises sea levels. Temperature spikes affect a lot of animals. For example, the green ring-tailed possum lives in a tropical environment. When there is a spike in temperature, it loses control of its body. Chloral bleaching happens when there is a rise in ocean temperature. When that happens, chloral turns white and releases all of its nutrients, making it vulnerable to disease. When extreme events increase, fire, hurricanes, droughts, and floods will become more frequent. When the sea level rises, it is because of melting ice caps and ice sheets. This takes away animals' habitats.
So in these next few slides, we're going to be talking all about hurricanes and climate change. So we're going to be talking about what is a hurricane, how climate change affects hurricanes, hurricanes before climate change, hurricanes after climate change, and so on.
A hurricane is a storm rapidly rotating in a circle. It is characterized by the low pressure center that is called the eye. It produces heavy rain, squalls, and dangerous thunderstorms. It occurs in the Atlantic Ocean and northeastern Pacific Oceans.
Climate change has had a tremendous effect on the hurricane scene across the world. Climate change is causing our ocean's water to warm up, and warm water is a key factor in the beginning process of strengthening storm development. Warmer waters lead to more intense storms because the rising water temperature causes the air to warm and become moist, and a hurricane needs the air to be very moist in order for it to be powered. The formation of a hurricane occurs when there is a high humidity, relatively constant winds at different altitudes, and it can occur when the surface ocean temperatures exceed about 79 degrees Fahrenheit. All of these necessities needed to form a hurricane are constantly seen across the world now that climate change is in full swing. Without climate change, our hurricanes would be a lot less frequent and most likely less powerful.
Okay, so now that we know what climate change really is and what it's all about, we can start to look into what hurricanes were like before and after climate change became a relevant topic and something that we research about in our society. So before, tropical storms were not nearly as intense as they are now, and that's something that we are slowly starting to learn and become more educated about. We do know that there were colder ocean surface temperatures and lower sea levels. That is something that has been affected because of climate change. And I also found a quote that says, for the continental United States and the Atlantic Basin, models project a 45 to 87% increase in the frequency of Category 4 and 5 hurricanes. So what this is explaining is that Category 4 and 5 hurricanes are the most intense, and the frequency and occurrence of those are becoming higher because of climate change, and that it has increased up to 87%. So we know that it is becoming more common for hurricanes of this strong power to happen in our environment. And I also found this graph that says the North Atlantic tropical cyclone activity, and it shows the years at the bottom, so you can see what it was like before climate change was really a relevant topic, so back in 1950. And it projects all the way to 2020, which is next year. So it shows that it was pretty low, and then it dropped, and it was slowly climbing, and it's reached 83.2 for ocean surface temperature, and it is projected to decrease. So we'll see if that happens. But that shows that the effects of climate change and on this sea surface temperature is really affecting the hurricanes as well. So now we can look at hurricanes after climate change. Like I said before, warmer air results in more precipitation. The rising seas create storm surge, and the warmer waters can increase hurricane power, which is the graph that we just looked at. I also found another quote that says, new research estimates that as the earth has warmed, the probability of a storm with precipitation levels like Hurricane Harvey was higher in Texas in 2017 than it was at the end of the 20th century. Because of climate change, such a storm evolved from a once in every 100 years event to a once in every 16 years event over this time period. So basically what this is saying is that Hurricane Harvey was a really bad storm and it did a lot of damage. But before Hurricane Harvey, it was very uncommon to see that type of storm ever, once in every 100 years. So basically in someone's lifetime, they would see it once. But now they're saying that it can occur every 16 years, which is much higher to see a storm like that than before. It says, in the future, it is likely there will be more intense storms with higher winds and stronger precipitation, but not necessarily more storms. So this is explaining that the likelihood of having a really strong hurricane is up, but not necessarily more storms are occurring, but the intensity is. And over here I have a graph that says monster storms are growing more common. So it shows at the bottom the maximum wind speed, and the numbers, the 2, 3, 4, and 5 are the hurricane category strength. So it's showing that it is becoming very more frequent to have a category 5, which is the red. It shows that it is projected all the way up to about 700% increase in frequency, so it is more likely to happen than it ever has before. So in conclusion, as a group, we've become more aware of the severity of climate change and how it's affecting hurricanes. We didn't really know that they went hand in hand. We knew that climate change was obviously affecting our environment, but we didn't know that it was necessarily affecting hurricanes so much and the storms that we're experiencing. We learned that hurricanes have intensified since climate change has come into effect. And in order to change this, we know that we need to minimize climate change on Earth, and everybody needs to do their part, or else hurricanes are going to keep getting stronger along with all the other things in our environment.